Hey, Vsauce. Michael here. On December 17, 1977, Gary Gilmore was executed for murder. He was the first prisoner executed by the United States after a 10-year suspension of the practice. When asked if he had any last words, he simply replied, "Let's do it." Years later, advertising executive Dan Wyden adapted those words into a slogan that is now more widely known than Gary Gilmore. Last words are powerful. They are the final statement a person's entire life has been leading up to. One last chance to go on record before obliteration. We don't know Albert Einstein's last words. He spoke them in German to a nurse who only knew English. They're lost. But what will be our first words? The first words from Earth. Extraterrestrials out there might hear from us. We have been broadcasting signals with radio waves wirelessly through the air for more than 100 years. Under the right conditions, those signals can leak into space and keep going outward at the speed of light through our galaxy, through the universe. Current human technology would struggle to tune into regular TV and radio broadcasts from as near as Mars, but perhaps other intelligent beings out there would fare better and could point their instruments at Earth and hear us. If so, what would the earliest thing be that they could receive? Our cosmic first words. Well, the earliest signal, robust enough to be picked up light years away, might have come from Hitler. His 1936 broadcasting of the Summer Olympics used powerful enough radio equipment to reach 41 countries, making it a contender for what listening extraterrestrials could receive as, to them, Earth's first words. Within the last 50 years or so, broadcast signals in general have become stronger than Hitler's Olympics and are better candidates for being intercepted. The earliest of them have traveled 50 light years away from Earth. Altogether, they have entertained billions of people, and by now, about 2,000 stars, the 133 brightest of which are shown here. So far, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech has traveled as far as the furthest on the diagram, Mu-Ara, which has 4 known planets. In 6 years, our first words on the moon will pass by Mu-Ara's system.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Those words were spoken by Neil Armstrong, seen here a few years before his death with Eugene Cernan, the most recent and currently last man to have walked on the surface of the moon. On December 14th, 1972, before climbing back into the lunar module, Cernan spoke our, as of today, last words on the moon. We leave as we came, and, God willing, as we shall return, with peace and hope for all mankind. Of course, once inside the lunar module, the crew kept talking, meaning that technically, the very last words humans have said on the surface of the moon were a countdown spoken by Harrison Jack Schmitt.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
We haven't been back to the moon since. But hold on. What were the first words spoken on the surface of the moon? Really? Armstrong's giant leap statement is a good answer, but what counts as being on the moon? If touchdown counts, then the first words spoken on the moon go not to Armstrong, but to Buzz Aldrin, who, on feeling at least one of the landing pads softly settle onto the lunar soil, spoke this immortal description.
Contact light.
Contact light. We are pumping broadcasts into space as an ever-expanding sphere of radio waves. But here's something humbling. Even while growing at the speed of light, Earth's radiosphere is puny. This is our galaxy, the Milky Way, comparatively The distance our radio signals, our voice, has traveled is this big. The universe is huge. How the heck are you supposed to be remembered in it? Utter last words that stick around after you die? Well, you may have heard the famous quote from Banksy. They say you die twice. One time when you stop breathing, and a second time a bit later on when somebody says your name for the last time. But your anonymous influence continues long after that, right? I mean, people may stop saying your name, but for instance, if you have kids and they have kids and so on, you continue on in a way, maybe just genetically, not by name. Well, people have tried. The world record for most children passed out of one single woman belongs to Mrs. Fyodor Vasilyev. She had 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets, for a grand total of 69 children. As for being a biological father, that takes less time. The documented record for most children fathered by one man is held by Ismail ibn Sharif, who is estimated to have had more than 900 children with multiple women. But children or not, in a feedback system like Earth or life, cause and effect are complicated and never ending. Remember the double pendulums from this video. A small difference in the initial conditions of a system can lead to enormously different outcomes later. On Tuesday, I'm flying from London to Los Angeles. The plane will be flown by pilots who can steer it toward the correct runway in the United States, but if the airplane needed to be aimed from London and sent on a straight shot, well, things would need to be very specific. Misaiming just 1 degree to the left at the beginning would send the plane not to Los Angeles, but nearly 160 kilometers south to Tijuana, Mexico. Your name and your last words might eventually be forgotten, but your status as an initial condition for the universe's future is already happening. Bach died before he could complete the art of fugue. The piece ends abruptly during Contrapunctus 14. So composers continue reconstructing it. For that reason, it is uniquely alive, speaking new last words all the time as new people meet it and finish it in their own way. Likewise, no matter how cool or lame and small you feel, you will continue. Your impact will be remembered. Mathematics guarantees it, even if, like Bach, you leave things unfinished. I've been watching Bravest Warriors on Cartoon Hangover lately. It's great. It was created by Pendleton Ward. And in the show, teenagers zip around the universe visiting star systems and planets. And here is my question. When will we do the same? Us humans in real life. I mean, we've managed to put people on the moon and land robots on asteroids and Mars, and even Titan, a moon of Saturn. Interplanetary travel is scary cool, but will we ever travel interstellarly? Certainly it will happen, right? I mean, Voyager 1 is expected to reach interstellar space sometime this year, or maybe in the next year or two, and it was launched way back in 1977. So shows like Bravest Warriors are pretty much just a glimpse of our future, maybe even one within our lifetimes. Right? Well, we're going to need a dong for this one, something you can do online now, guys. The Hayden Planetarium's digital universe allows you to explore a 3-dimensional map of our Milky Way. Now, there are about 81 visible stars within just 20 light years of our own sun. The nearest is Proxima Centauri, which is only 4.3 light years away. Getting there? Piece of cake. Piece of difficult cake. because a light year is an incredibly long distance. It's the distance that light in a vacuum will travel in an entire year. And in just 1 second, light can travel so far as to circle the entire equator of Earth. 7 times. Now, a fast bullet can travel at about 1,500 meters per second, and Voyager 1 is traveling at about 17,000 meters per second relative to the Sun. Also relative to the Sun, our Earth is orbiting at a speed of 29,800 meters per second. That's pretty fast, but the fastest man-made object ever was the Helios 2 solar probe, which traveled at a maximum speed of 70,220 meters per second. Impressive, right? Well, even at that speed, the fastest speed ever reached by any man-made object, crossing this little old gap and reaching Proxima Centauri would take 19,000 years. But technology in the future is bound to be improved, along with the maximum speeds we are able to obtain. Even using what we know now, a solar sail could easily provide the acceleration needed to reach near light speed speeds. And our current understanding of physics theoretically allows for things like wormholes, which in theory could move a spacecraft from one point in space to another faster than light normally could. And who could forget the famous Alcubierre drive, an idea that fits within most models of our universe and proposes a way to deliver a spacecraft to a distant object faster than light can get there, not by moving the spacecraft, but instead by collapsing and expanding space itself. Things like wormholes and Alcubierre drives are theoretical, but if they could one day become a reality, how far away might that day be? It matters, and figuring out exactly when in time we should begin an interstellar journey is called a weight calculation. Leave too soon, and before a ship launched today full of frozen embryos ever got to its destination, it would be passed by astronauts who left hundreds or thousands of years later at a point in time when technology was advanced enough to lap what we have today. Andrew Kennedy calculated that given the pace of our progress as far as travel velocity is concerned and Earth's mean annual economic growth, the soonest human civilization might ever reach Barnard's star, 6 light years away, is 1,104 years from today, which isn't within any of our lifetimes. It might also be a bit optimistic, because it assumes that we not only solve the problem of speed, but that we also solve problems like how to survive interstellar radiation for years, or how to avoid collisions with interstellar material at high speeds. It also assumes that before we achieve the technology needed to successfully interstellarly travel, all of humankind isn't wiped out by some cataclysmic natural disaster. It may sound unlikely, but we're not talking about the near future, we're talking about thousands of years from now. Let's put it this way. Even given our current slow means of space travel, it's estimated that within 5 to 50 million years, we could theoretically explore and colonize our whole galaxy. That's a lot of time, though. In fact, statistically speaking, within the next 500,000 years, it's very likely that Earth will encounter a meteorite nearly a kilometer across. Hopefully, when that happens, we have the prevention abilities needed to keep ourselves safe. But given all of this information, it's easy to see why the 2008 Joint Propulsion Conference concluded that it was improbable that humans would ever explore beyond the solar system. It's quite depressing to think that scenes like this one from Shutterstock may be destined to only ever remain that, science fiction. Wait, how quickly is the camera moving in that clip? We're used to seeing science fiction scenes like this, but a nebula tends to be light years across, which means that in this clip we are traveling at least the speed of light, if not faster. Would it really look like that? I covered this briefly in my black hole video, but not completely. If you were to travel at the speed of light, or near the speed of light, the universe ahead of you wouldn't look like it usually did. First of all, your field of view would increase. It would appear as if the universe was receding away from you as you accelerated. At the same time, all of the light reaching you would be blue shifted until you were left with this. You may have seen this on Vsauce too. It's the cosmic background radiation blue shifted all the way up into the visible range. MIT Game Lab offers a free downloadable game that puts you in an environment where the speed of light can be lowered all the way down to typical walking speed. You can experience all of the visual effects I just discussed, but I wanted to know what it would look like if the speed of light was where it is and I took a journey from Earth to the moon. So I enlisted my friend Liam from World of the Orange and New Music to put together a simulation of what it might actually look like to accelerate to nearly the speed of light and then slow down during a trip from Earth to the moon. Enjoy. Whether or not you should believe that all the right factors will come together and humans will one day travel that quickly or reach interstellar destinations largely comes down to whether you want to be an optimist or a pessimist. But what we've accomplished so far is quite amazing, considering how weak, flimsy, and vulnerable the human body is in the vacuum of space. Bad Astronomer and SciShow have great videos discussing this topic, and now, thanks to the brilliant team at Bravest Warriors, I'm going to go to space. But not while wearing a Vsauce suit. No. I'll do it naked. Well, okay, no, not that naked. And also maybe some muscles? Yep, so that's pretty much what I would look like. The moment I'm exposed to the vacuum of space, my body would not inflate and explode. Now, the body's a very nicely contained system, but those parts of me that aren't well contained, they'll be the first to go. The air in my lungs and digestive tract would quickly rush out. Moist, soft tissues would rapidly lose water. My mouth and lips and eyes would dry out and swell. As water was pulled to the surface of these things, it would vaporize, and the decrease in its pressure would cool my mouth and eyes to near freezing. My body would inflate to about twice its normal size as gases in my blood came out of solution, slowly evaporating away, cooling the surface of my skin. Oh, and the blood vessels in my eyes would likely burst, spilling blood into my eyes, which along with all the other fluid in my eyes would be rapidly vaporizing on the surface, freezing and drying them out. Within about 15 seconds, I would go unconscious because oxygen wasn't reaching my brain. And as far as I'm concerned, that would be the end of the entire ordeal. For another 90 seconds or so, I would still technically be alive, but I wouldn't be aware of it or remember any of it. My dead body would remain internally quite warm for a while, because in the near vacuum of space there isn't much matter to conduct or convect heat away from me. Instead, I would really only lose heat through radiation, a much less efficient method. It would take hours for me to cool down to the temperature of space, and by then, I would be nothing but a dried up piece of slightly bloated and stretched, desiccated human jerky. If I was exposed to the sun's full-on radiation, not filtered by the usual atmosphere of Earth, I would be a grossly sunburned piece of jerky. In case that makes you hungry, let me give you some nutritional facts. 200 pounds of human meat in outer space would eventually become about 120 pounds of freeze-dried jerky. And given what would be left of me that would be edible, as a snack, I'd be worth about 115,000 calories. Maybe humans are the only intelligent life in the universe. But if you believe that intelligent life could have arisen on other planets, an interesting idea occurs: the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi calculated that given the number of planets believed to exist in our galaxy, at least some of them must have been habitable to life as we know it, and in many cases, millions and millions of years before life on Earth even existed. So if interstellar traveling between stars in different solar systems, really is possible for intelligent life to do, why have we not been visited by aliens yet? Well, maybe we have been visited. Maybe they're here right now and we just can't perceive them. Or maybe we haven't been discovered. Or maybe we are alone. Or maybe we're just not worth visiting. So what are you waiting for? Live your life in a way that makes traveling light years just to hang out with you worth it. Hey, Vsauce, Michael here. But what could be out there? The likelihood of extraterrestrial intelligence has been the subject of an equation, and the current lack of any communication with aliens the subject of a paradox. But here's a different question. If we were to hear from intelligent life beyond Earth, what would really happen next? Well, no government has ever officially adopted a post-detection policy, and when asked how they would deal with a confirmed message from extraterrestrial intelligence, the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs simply said that their job does not include any issues regarding the question you pose. So are we unprepared? Would chaos ensue? These things are unlikely, but the way we prepare for and anticipate our species encountering one from beyond Earth is important and illuminating, even though improbable. Historically, we have acted as though alien life exists. Back contamination is a concern that a man-made object returning from space could carry with it undiscovered alien life forms, especially viruses and bacteria that could wipe out life on Earth. This was a serious concern felt by serious people when we first sent humans to the moon. When Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin returned from the lunar surface, they didn't immediately hug their families and join a public parade. Instead, they were sealed up in biological isolation garments and flown to a quarantine facility to be locked away for 3 weeks in Houston, Texas. By Apollo 15, the practice was discontinued, but forward contamination has also been a real concern. When NASA sent the Galileo spacecraft to survey Jupiter and its moons, it got amazing data, but there was a problem. It had never been sterilized. Because life, even liquid water, could exist on these moons, NASA made the decision to avoid contaminating an alien biosphere, and when the mission was over, steered Galileo into Jupiter, where it burned up and was destroyed, along with any Earth life possibly on board. So protocols and decisions have been officially made in the past under the assumption that aliens might exist. When it comes to actually hearing from aliens, receiving a message from technologically advanced life forms capable of sending us, say, a radio signal, groups like SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, are the ones actively listening. They have an ear to the sky. And they are prepared. The SETI Committee of the International Academy of Astronautics created a declaration of principles concerning activities following the detection of extraterrestrial intelligence. No government has officially adopted any of its recommendations, but if something were to happen, it would likely be the first place authorities went. It's one of the only handbooks they'd have. Seth Shostak explained the philosophy and atmosphere at SETI, predicting that because verifying a signal is slow and the media are fast, you will be media blasted about a possible detection days before the people who find it are certain it's for real. In the midst of rampant media speculation, elation, and panic on the part of the public, the most likely string of official events after the discovery of a message from extraterrestrial life would follow SETI recommendations. First of all, the individual or team who discovered the message would continue to assess the credibility of the message and alert all parties to SETI's declaration. Next, once they were certain the message was real, the Central Bureau of Astronomical Telegrams would be alerted, so as to inform observers all over the world. They would also inform the Secretary General of the United Nations, because Article 11 of the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and Other Bodies, says they should. The first official news we got, the public, would likely be in terms of the Rio scale. First presented to the International Astronautical Congress, the Rio scale measures the significance of consequences of evidence of extraterrestrial life, making it a likely tool to be used because it neatly manages public reaction. There's a great online calculator you can play with to see how the Rio scale works. It takes into account the credibility of the message on a scale from believed extraterrestrial origin to hoax, how repeatable the observation is, what type of message it is, for instance, is it uninterpretable or clearly for us, and how far away it is. Is it extragalactic or near enough that we could respond and hear back within the length of a human lifetime? Seth Shostak and Ivan Almar applied the Rio scale to fictional and historical events. It's a great way to get a feel for how the Rio scale will affect the vocabulary authorities use when reporting on an extraterrestrial message. They considered the moon monolith, discovered in 2001, A Space Odyssey, a 6 on the Rio scale. Noteworthy. In the movie Independence Day, the initial unidentified signal would be about a 4 to 8, moderate to far-reaching. Once the message is confirmed to be no further than the moon and moving, it would be an automatic 10. Extraordinary. In real life, the Martian face discovered in 1976 was a 2, low, until high-resolution images from 2001 revealed it was nothing. Just a thing that looked funny under the right conditions, and was immediately downgraded to a 0. No significance. So if we were to receive a message from extraterrestrial intelligence, those things and those words would likely be used. But who would be in charge? Although she denies ever being selected or prepared for such a role, Maslin Othman, the director of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, is a pretty good candidate, as is Paul Davies, the chairman of SETI's Post-Detection Task Force. Were it to be necessary, both of those people are in positions to become ambassadors for Earth-alien relations. So what do we say back? Well, if we want to show that we are intelligent, perhaps we should send back a string of information representing pi, or the Fibonacci sequence. Or maybe we shouldn't say anything at all. Stephen Hawking warned, quote, "If aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans." And Professor Simon Conway Morris, a Cambridge University paleontologist, has said that if the cosmic phone rings, we shouldn't pick it up. Observations like that are at the core of the importance of this video's question. We can learn a lot by looking not just at how we prepare for a space message, but how we imagine actual contact with aliens going. Anthropologist Catherine Denning frequently points out that the ways we imagine contact with aliens happening often says more about ourselves than it does any hypothetical aliens. We do this all the time. When we project our own modern-day ambitions and fears onto prehistoric people, Christopher Ryan and Casilda Heta call that Flintstoning. So let's piggyback off of that phrase and label any projection of modern human behaviors, desires, anxieties onto futuristic, technologically advanced beings capable of visiting us jetsoning. Some examples of jetsoning involve thinking that any aliens out there trying to contact us might want to hurt us. Maybe that's simply because whenever we have met new people, we often enslave them or pity them or take advantage of them. It's also possible to think that aliens will be friendly. They'll want to help us. The ways we imagine them helping us say a lot about the kind of help we think we need. There's a poetic idea that from space, Earth looks peaceful. All of the boundaries we have put up don't exist. You can't see them. But that's not entirely true. The old boundary between East and West Germany is still visible from space, each side using different light bulbs. And this is the boundary between Pakistan and India. You can see from space India flooding the border with lights to deter smugglers from bringing across weapons and ammunition. We don't all get along together here on Earth. We are afraid of each other, we don't trust each other, and the wrinkles and scars that causes are visible from space. Imagining how aliens would interpret that, communicate with us, and how we would or should respond teaches us a lot about ourselves. It makes our struggles strange again, less ignorable, and that is the entire point of fantasy. G.K. Chesterton said that the function of the imagination is not to make strange things settled, so much as to make settled things strange. How many people are in space right now? .com tells us that the answer is 6. Ever since the first person reached outer space 52 years ago, more than 500 humans have left Earth, and they've gone as far as the moon, an impressive distance. I mean, space stations, which we use in outer space today, are way cool, but to scale, they only orbit about this far away from Earth, whereas the moon, where Apollo astronauts went, is way out here. For the last 12 years, there has been a continuous and uninterrupted presence of humans living in space. Different people at different times ever since November of 2001. But so far, all of us, every human who has ever existed, was born right here on Earth. Of course, Earth is a giant collection of matter that got together in space, held together by its own gravity, so technically we were all born in space. But I want to talk about outer space. What is our relation to it and within it? How suited is our biology for the larger universe we were born into? More specifically, if you were born and raised beyond Earth, what would you look like? First things first, where is outer space? Well, outer space happens to be about 100,000 meters above your head. At that point, the atmosphere is so thin that in order to achieve lift, an aircraft has to travel at a speed so quickly that that speed is the same as an orbital speed. An orbital speed is a speed that is so fast, even with no lift, even while falling, you don't. Because the Earth literally curves away from you as fast as you fall towards it. This is what astronauts in the International Space Station are really doing. They're falling. It's a common misconception that astronauts float around weightless in space because there is no gravity there. But there's plenty of gravity. In fact, there's pretty much the same amount of gravity operating on them that there is operating on you right now while you watch this video. Believe it or not, if we built a tower all the way up to where the International Space Station orbits, 370,000 meters high, and you walked out onto the top of that tower, it would feel kind of like this. You would just be walking around like I'm walking right now. You wouldn't feel that much different. But the International Space Station would be whizzing by at 17,000 miles per hour. It has to, because they are falling. So to say that astronauts float around in orbit because they are experiencing zero gravity is very misleading. Really what they are feeling is zero G, where G is acceleration felt as weight. G hurts so good. Because gravity's limiting influence ensures that we develop correctly and healthily. After all, it is what we were born to thrive in. So asking what a human would look like if conceived, gestated, delivered, and raised in orbit would look like requires a discussion of weightlessness. Realistically, people building colonies on planets beyond Earth or traveling through space for long periods of time who expected new humans to be born would utilize technology that helped mimic conditions here on Earth. But until artificial gravity is perfected and can be easily implemented, it's important to understand the effect weightlessness has on our biology and other things. For instance, in a zero-G environment, hot air doesn't rise. So a candle flame is not shaped like a stretched ball of glowing gas that's drawn upward. Instead, it's just a round ball of hot gas. We are not sure we can make babies in space. The logistics of merely hugging are difficult enough. A recent invention called the two-suit might make it easier. The two-suit provides effortless intimacy in weightless environments, such as outer space or on planets with low gravity. But will it be enough to ensure that conception happens? The enzyme responsible for stopping the movement of a sperm cell's tail doesn't work very well when they're at zero G. In space, sperm swim faster. One thing we know about babies inside mothers in space involves the development of the vestibular system, canals in the inner ear that use the flow of fluid to determine movement, up versus down, and balance. In a zero-G environment, the fluid in the vestibular system just floats around. It's confused, and this can lead to motion sickness, visual illusions, and disorientation. It's called space adaptation syndrome, and it affects about 50% of astronauts. Confusion about motion can make you vomit, car sick, seasick, zero-G sick because of survival. It's believed that motion sickness, a confusion about acceleration, is similar to the effects caused by the consumption of poisonous plants, in which case vomiting can save your life. Pregnant rats taken to space give birth to babies back on Earth that struggle with directions. Unlike rat babies that gestated here on Earth, the ones that gestated in space have trouble righting themselves when thrown into water. They do tend to be better at processing orientations common during weightlessness, which is a good sign for humans, gestated and born and raised in space, but it's some of the only good news. Vestibular fluid isn't the only fluid to be affected by a zero-G environment. All of your body fluids are. On Earth, gravity pulls those fluids down. But in orbit, the fluid is free to evenly distribute, giving astronauts their characteristic bird legs and puffy faces. Cosmetically, it's kind of a bummer. And all of that new fluid pressure in your face can compromise vision. Of 27 astronauts studied after long space flights, 9 had fluid expansion around the optic nerve, 6 had eyeballs flattened in the back by fluid pressure, and 4 had bulging optic nerves. More fluid pressure in your head causes an errant message that your body must have too much fluid. So the bodies of zero-G travelers respond by producing less blood. Astronauts can lose up to 22% of their total blood volume while in space, leading to weaker, atrophied hearts. Away from Earth's protection, radiation from the sun and the rest of the universe is incredibly dangerous, and we're still not exactly sure how to best guard against it. Mice exposed to levels of radiation expected during interplanetary journeys showed signs of different brain blood flow and larger plaques of the type found in patients with Alzheimer's. Psychologically, feelings of isolation in space, thinking about just how far away you are from the rest of humanity, can affect you physically. Scientists working at the South Pole have developed compromised immune systems with fewer T cells. As for the shape of your body, Fully grown astronauts in orbit, no longer pressed down by Earth's typical G-force, experience spinal expansion, sometimes growing by as much as 3% before they come back to Earth. A 6-foot-tall human can go to space and come back as a 6-foot-2-inch tall person. Without usual and necessary stress, bones in space atrophy at a rate of about 1% per month. Given enough time, total bone mass lost can be as high as 40 to 60%. And when weightless, you don't need as much muscle strength to move around. This causes the muscles of people weightless in space to atrophy. Those that you use to fight gravity can shrink 5% per month for a total muscle mass loss of 20%. It's all kind of scary and sad, but don't bother crying over it because without 1G to pull them down, tears don't work the same way in space. Astronaut Chris Hadfield makes excellent videos about how things happen differently in orbit. For instance, tears just pool up on your face due to surface tension. In space, you can cry, but as he says, the tears don't fall. We know that these problems exist for adults in space. Theoretically, they would affect developing children in space even more so. Parallels have been drawn between the way a child's skeleton would likely develop in orbit and diseases that cause weak and soft bones here on Earth, bones that break and heal according to different forces than the typical downward ones, like rickets. It's tenable to say that without proper precautions, exercise, and care, like adult astronauts already take, children developing in space could look like this. Not because of rickets or a lack of vitamin D, but because the usual forces and active use required for healthy bone development just wouldn't be there. Added to the other threats, imagine a body shaped like this, but with thinner legs, thin, weak muscles, a puffier face, poor eyesight, and a higher than usual proclivity to dementia later in life. Doesn't sound very good, does it? Remember though that a lot of this is speculation. Few studies have been done on the topic, and few are planned for the future. We don't even know if a healthy fetus can develop in the first place, or if conception can even occur in space. When I think about how little we know about our bodies and how our bodies might grow and develop in the larger universe beyond Earth, I like to think about plankton. These little guys live in the ocean, and they exist in staggering numbers. Many varieties are too small to even see individually, but collectively, they can be seen from space. It's estimated that there are more plankton in the oceans of Earth than there are stars in our galaxy. More plankton on Earth than there are galaxies in the observable universe. And these guys wander around at the whim of ocean currents. They're wanderers. In fact, they get their name from the Greek word for wanderer, a name that they share with objects seen wandering in the sky. Planets. Plankton on a planet. Wanderers on a wanderer. Maybe, like ocean plankton, we humans are destined to wander far and wide, eventually also becoming more numerous than the stars in our galaxy. It's within the realm of what we can achieve. But before we start feeling too excited, too proud, keep in mind that we know very little about how our bodies grow and develop outside of this wanderer, this planet. And even though we know a lot of older words that sound like body, fundamentally, we don't even know why we call these things bodies in the first place. And the year 6009 will be the very first year since 1961 that a year, when written in Hindu-Arabic numerals, can be inverted and still look the same. But you and I probably won't live long enough to enjoy the year 6009. Human lives just aren't long enough. We will miss out on that. What other cool future events will we be missing? Well, First of all, you and I will probably be gone before the completion of the Time Pyramid in Winding, Germany. It will eventually be a pile of 120 concrete blocks, but the builders are only adding one block every 10 years. Since beginning in 1993, they've added only the first 3. At this rate, the pyramid will be completed in the year 3183, the final block placed by our great more than 30 greats grandchildren. But even they will miss an opportunity to frolic and play safely in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, the zone of alienation, where radioactive contamination from the 1986 disaster will remain at levels too high for safe human activity until not the year 4000, not the 5000s, not the 6000s. It will finally be safe probably in the year 22,000. Possibly within our lifetimes, but definitely within the next 1 million years, stars like Betelgeuse and Eta Carina will explode in brilliant supernovas visible from Earth. I'm bummed I'm probably going to miss out on these events because for a few weeks it will look almost as if Earth has 2 suns. Despite being hundreds, thousands of light years away, their supernovas will shine brighter than the full moon at night and be visible even during daytime. But the real sky show comes in 3.75 billion years. Our galaxy is full of stars. Viewed from the surface of the Earth, they look like little drops of milk in the sky, which is why we call it the Milky Way galaxy. But all galaxies are named after milk. Milk, lactose, lactic, galactic, galaxies. And every drop of milk in the sky, every star that you can see, is inside our galaxy, the Milky Way. But there's a blurry, distant shape, this one. It's not a star, it's not a cloud of gas in our galaxy, it is an entirely different galaxy, the Andromeda Galaxy, and it's 2.5 million light years away from our own. It contains twice as many stars as the Milky Way, and it is coming our way, headed toward us at 300 kilometers a second, faster than a bullet. Now right now, the sky looks like this. In 2 billion years, Andromeda will have approached so closely that people will look up at the sky and see this. In 3.75 billion years, the night sky will be like a scene from a science fiction movie or an awesome desktop wallpaper. Incredible. And kind of scary. After this scene, the sky will literally be glowing with the birth of new stars as the Milky Way and Andromeda collide, mixing up into a brilliant cosmic tie-dye. This simulation shows how Andromeda might collide with the Milky Way, but keep in mind that you are watching billions of years pass every second. These galaxies are moving fast, but they're also huge and covering even huger distances. They will collide in the future, but within the briefness of a single human life, they appear almost frozen, unmoving. A couple billion years after colliding, the cores of both galaxies will be married together in a bright glowing center. Earth, now a stepchild to what was once Andromeda, part of a new, bigger family called Milkdromeda. It would be so cool to be alive to see our galaxy colliding with another. But don't get all FOMO, consumed by a fear of missing out. Because whatever life is around then will have plenty to envy us for. They may have spectacular nightly views, but secretly wish they'd been born in our time to experience, say, the beginning of the internet. They will actually miss out on a lot of things. Because the moon moves 1 centimeter further away from Earth every year, 600 million years from today, the moon will no longer be close enough to Earth to completely block out the sun. Future humans, or descendants of humans, will therefore miss out on a chance to ever see for themselves the beauty of a total solar eclipse from the surface of Earth. Long before Earth dries up, Niagara Falls will dry up. Well, not the water part, but the falls part. Every year, the rushing water of Niagara erodes the rock at the top of the falls 1 foot backward. By the year 52,000, it will have eroded all the way to Lake Erie, and our progeny will have no Niagara Falls to enjoy. Granite has an erosion rate of about 1 inch per 10,000 years. So certainly by the year 7 million, Mount Rushmore, especially its faces, will no longer exist. And because they slowly get pulled in or ejected into space, in 50 to 100 million years, Saturn will no longer have its lovely rings. So life on Earth in the future might have awesome supernovas and galactic collisions to look forward to, but they probably won't have Niagara Falls, Mount Rushmore, total solar eclipses, or Saturn's rings. They also won't have you. But you have you. Except not all of it. Babies don't begin to form episodic memories right away, meaning that you missed out on. You don't remember 2 of the most seminal events in your life, your conception and your birth. But you can experience a bit of those moments right now. First of all, when was I conceived.com lets you enter your birth date and get back the week your parents probably made you happen, as well as the #1 song and the #1 movie of that week, which may have also been involved. Light travels quickly, the most quickest in fact, but it can take a photon millions of years to escape from the interior of the star it was created in through nuclear fusion. It takes time, just like your own gestation in your mother's womb. Newly conceived photons struggle through a dense, stellar jungle of atoms and molecules and electrons that absorb and re-emit the photon, taking a little bit of energy from it as it randomly rolls around like a pinball. Sometimes, after thousands or millions of years, its random walk finally leads it to the star's surface, where it pops out into space, in a way, is born. A lucky tiny percentage of the photons that reach the surface of a star find themselves on a path that will intersect with Earth. And if you are lucky, those photons will end their journey by being absorbed onto your own retina. If you enter the date of your birth or the approximate date of your conception into this online calculator, you can find a star that is as many light years away from Earth as you are old. When you look up at that star today, you are seeing light that left the star the very month you were born, or photons that left that star and entered space when your entire body was just one cell. Space is really big, and your life is very short. But space is so gosh darn big, you don't have to miss out on everything. Bear Grylls, the host of Man vs. Wild, has 3 sons, and I'm not kidding, their names are Jesse, Huckleberry, and Marmaduke. Well, here's another name for you, Michael Collins. Not the Irish revolutionary leader, but Michael Collins, the NASA astronaut. This guy was part of the Apollo 11 crew, meaning that he was part of the team that went to, landed on the moon, and became the first people to walk on the moon. Except, you might not know Michael Collins' name as well, because he did not get to walk on the moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked around, but Michael Collins had to stay orbiting the moon in the command module to link up with them later. Well, this is where things get lonely. People realized that Michael Collins, there in the command module orbiting the moon alone, was in a quite unique position. When he circled around to the far side of the moon, the side that faced away from Earth, he lost all radio contact with Earth and with Armstrong and Aldrin. For about the 48 minutes that Michael Collins was orbiting around the other end of the moon, he was quite literally the most lonely a human being has ever been. He was the furthest from any other humans that any human has ever been since the very beginning of mankind. If you haven't yet seen Veritasium's video about how far away the moon is from Earth, you should definitely check it out. But the whole point is that we tend to think the moon is much closer than it really is, because most illustrations we see put the two objects quite close because it's easier. But to scale, this is how far away the moon is. We actually measure the distance to the moon quite frequently using reflectors that were left on the moon. That's right, they're just sitting there all alone on the surface of the moon waiting for us to shoot lasers at them. By looking at how long it took the light to return to us, we can calculate quite accurately how far away the moon is. And we've been doing this for a while, and one of the most bizarre things we've learned is that the moon is actually spiraling away from Earth quite slowly. Every year, the moon is about 38 millimeters further away than it was the year before. 38 millimeters is about 1.5 inches. Those reflectors are not the only thing we left on the moon. We actually left a lot of man-made stuff, a lot of junk there. There is an entire Wikipedia article just listing the big stuff we left behind. But there are man-made objects that are even further away from the Earth than the moon. In fact, there are 4 things that humans have built that have traveled so far away from Earth, they are no longer within our solar system. Voyager 1 is actually the furthest man-made object from Earth ever. And aboard, NASA included a gold-plated record that contained information about humanity, just in case anything out there found them. You can read all about everything that NASA put on the disc by following a link in this video's description, but the item that has always resonated with me is a song they chose. They put lots and lots of audio on the disc, but one song in particular was chosen to represent to whoever or whatever found it, the human emotion of loneliness. The song is by Blind Willie Johnson, and it's called "Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground." There are no lyrics, just humming. You can listen to it by following a link in this video's description. And as you listen, think about the weight of that meaning. This song was picked to represent to aliens what loneliness is. Blind Willie Johnson himself wasn't blind his whole life. He was blinded as a child when his stepmother threw lye in his face. And he died of malarial fever after his home burned down, and he had nowhere else to live but on wet newspaper. But now, his song is way out there in interstellar space, representing us. Thanks for watching.